Hi, I'm going to give you an update of what is to come with my channel, and I'm also going to talk about rules in tabletop role-playing games. But before all of that, I want to tell you about a system of dungeon terrain. It's called the Abishai modular dungeon terrain. I'm going to put a link in the description below to the video trailer. It looks really cool. I don't own it. I haven't used the pieces and the battle mat, but it looks awesome. I recommend that you check it out. It's basically like a mat where you can stick these pieces of walls. You have like solid walls that you can decorate with stickers. I imagine that it's also pretty easy to paint them and add texture to them as well. And like I said, I haven't tried it out. I cannot tell you that I have reviewed or that I approve the quality of the product, but it looks really neat. I recommend that you take a look and decide if it's for you or not. But the walls, they stick to the battle mat, and even if you roll dice against those walls, they stay in place. I remember watching another video, maybe in that same channel of the game company, where they actually set up an entire dungeon map and they carry the battle mat around and the pieces stick to it. So I think that's also pretty useful. You can transport the map with all the pieces in place. And maybe, for example, if you're going to play at a friend's house or whatever, maybe you have your map all set up. Maybe you're a dungeon master and you're going to visit your friend. You could build the map beforehand and take it, put it in the trunk of your car or whatever, and it's going to stay in place. So very interesting concept in my opinion. I recommend that you take a look at the very least. And like I said, I haven't used it. I do not own it. So it's up to you if you decide to try it out. But I thought it would be interesting for those of you that like tactical combat in dungeon crawls and perhaps in some skirmish games where the characters go into dungeons and such. Well, about the update. As you can see, I have managed to up or speed up, or how would you say, produce more content. My rate of bringing out reviews and videos has gone up because, well, I think that it has a lot to do with eating healthier and healthier and doing more and more exercise. Many of you know that I'm a martial arts instructor, but lately, because of different practices that I have already talked throughout the years, I think my energy level is going up and up, and I'm feeling more vigorous when it comes to balancing different aspects of my life. So I hope I can keep up this rate of producing more reviews, more videos. You will see more content related to free league role-playing games like Simbarum. If I had, I also want to cover more Forbidden Lands materials. There was this book that was sent to me by as a review copy, but it never got here because the mail service has been such a mess because of the whole virus madness. But I think it was the Bleak. I remember, I forgot the name, but I'm definitely going to review more Forbidden Lands material. So I just need to take care of some things in the QE, in the line of reviews, but definitely expect more Simbarum content. My next review is also going to give you a chance to win a PDF of the product that I'm going to review. I'm also working on a role-playing game that I recently obtained as a review copy. I don't want to spoil too many things. I want to keep things mysterious, but it's a complex genre. I would call it a dystopian horror noir splatterpunk experience. Imagine the Mutant Chronicles, but you do not have a war between corporations. A single corporation has already won the war, the battle, and now it has taken over the entire world. So that's basically it, but the player characters are quite monstrous. I'm going to handle it as a multi-part review, just like my other recent reviews. I hope you will watch that when it comes out. I will, on my community tab of the channel, I'm going to put a little heads up of when that is going to be released soon. But I also, I'm going to keep bringing out parts of my review featuring the Dark Lord role-playing game. If you haven't seen those parts of the review, I recommend that you watch them. It's a role-playing game where you act as you're the big bad guy, the Sauron of the setting, or perhaps an anti-hero like Cain from the Legacy of Cain. It's really good. Mm. And besides that, if I get the chance, I want to bring out other material related to war games. Perhaps I really want to continue the House in Fata Morgana series. And I have finally played enough of a solo role-playing game, and I would call that solo role-playing game the roguelike of solo tabletop RPGs. It's very difficult. The theme is also quite heavy. It's an occult theme of sorts. I also want to review that one. I think it's very deep. As a solo role-playing game, there's a lot to analyze about it. You could basically bring out a series of videos analyzing different aspects of that solo role-playing game. So I also want to eventually produce or create a review featuring that solo RPG. Now, I wanted to talk about using rules in tabletop role-playing games because I have seen some conflicted situations throughout the years of people that are in favor of using the rules, the different mechanics of different systems, but some other people want to push them completely aside and focus completely on storytelling. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. I have talked a bit about this situation in past videos, but not as much in my opinion. Well, I think that putting technicisms aside, as people have created role-playing games since the beginning, they always wanted to have this experience where you not only tell a story, you are also playing a game. The moment that you are, for example, telling stories around a campfire and you start to add some small rules as to how things will be resolved in that story, then that storytelling experience stops being just like a campfire experience. It turns into a role-playing game. And I also think that, for example, if you're playing a tabletop game like any war game that you like, and you are suddenly speaking as the characters, as the generals and soldiers, you're coming up with personalities for those soldiers, those generals, then you are playing a role. When you're speaking as those playing pieces, that war game has turned into a role-playing game. That's my vision of things. Maybe you disagree, but that's how I see it. I think that rules should always work in favor of the story, and that the story, whenever there is some sort of situation that needs to be resolved in a fair way, must rely on rules. I think that some people could have conflicts with these concepts because of personal issues, in my opinion. Because, for example, someone who wants to follow the rules of a role-playing game in a very narrow and strict way, without bending those rules when it is necessary to represent some thematic or flavorful element in the story, or perhaps there is a better way to handle a situation, perhaps in a more realistic or even over the top way, depending on the role-playing game. Those people that want to stick to a very narrow, very strict, very dense way of handling the rules, I think they have some personal issues. In most cases that I have seen, those types of people are frustrated with a particular activity in their real life, and they want to use role-playing games to fulfill that desire, but they never get to do it because role-playing games are entertaining. They have great emotional and intellectual value, in my opinion, but they will never be the real way. So I have met, for example, different people that want a very narrow, close-minded way of handling combat. And a lot of you know that I love crunchy combat and simulationist role-playing games. I have released several videos talking about how I love the mechanics, the simulationist aspect of combat. But there are people that they want those rules. They do not want to deviate or move away from a particular system, and they consider that everything else is just like complete crap. Mm. And I think those people were sometimes very frustrated that they didn't experience certain physical activities in real life, and they want to satisfy that need through the game. So they need to understand that, in my opinion, that they will never satisfy that need through role-playing games. If they want, for example, to practice some sort of martial art, when it comes to combat, they should do it in real life. Mm. Or if for some reason they cannot do it in real life, they have to come to terms with that fact. And this applies to many other things, not just combat. Perhaps rules related to survival situations, anything related to science and technology, perhaps. So I think that once those issues are removed, those people will enjoy role-playing games a lot more, and they will be more flexible with the rules. But then we have the other side of the spectrum. There are people that just want to completely focus on the story. They want to ignore all of the rules, all of the systems. I have seen some terrible cases across the years. I remember one time in one video I talked about how I wanted to play Anima. Anima is it's a fairly crunchy or complex system, very deep. And my first experiences, I wanted to approach these people that said that they knew how to play Anima, and they were just telling a story, ignoring all of the rules. They weren't using anything about the system. So in that case, I think that those people wanted to hide there is no other way to put it, their incompetence on handling the crunchier aspects of the system. And because of that, their games were lackluster, in my opinion, because every time there was some sort of situation where you needed to solve things in a fair way, they could have resorted or used the rules, the different mechanics, and they just completely ignored it. The game was without any risk. It felt too easy. There was no dramatic tension because you were basically making up everything that happened. That's what rules are for, to create that uncertainty and that logic between the character's skill set and powers, and how those abilities and powers and effects and all of that apply or can be used in a situation. Because role-playing games, they have that game part of them where you win or lose, even though you do not lose the game entirely. That is, if your character dies, you just create another one. Or maybe you are lucky enough the other members of the party survive and they revive you or raise you in some way through spells or through weird science. You also have that storytelling aspect, because if you are just playing the game, there is not going to be a narrative. You won't be telling a story. It's going to feel more like a competitive tabletop game. In some cases, some RPGs are competitive, but you are still playing that, telling that story, creating those personalities and developing those personalities. So in my opinion, the rules are there to create that structure, to support the story. The story unfolds organically when you use the rules to represent different skills and powers and events and battles and everything about the story. It creates a certain logic so that you do not fall in a sort of immature play style, where you're like when you're little kids and you're playing with your toys and you're like, oh, I hit you, no, I hit you, and they do not get to decide which attack was successful. That's what rules exist for. And they also add to that, you could say that they create that simulationist aspect. Even in the most over-the-top, far-flung RPG experience, you create those simulations, those models that sometimes you can actually apply them in real life. There have been countless times throughout the time I have been living. I'm almost 40 years old. I'm going to be 39 this year. And I've always created those imaginary models of situations. Every time there was this dangerous or difficult to handle situation, I basically played a small role-playing game in my mind, seeing how things would proceed. And I made the right choices that kept me safe, that kept me alive, that allowed me to help different people and help myself too. And it's thanks to role-playing games, I managed to create those situations, creating a structure, taking into consideration like these imaginary rules of what would happen, making sense of the probabilities, the odds of the situation. And so I think that's why rules are important. And again, you need that narrative, that flow to make sense of things and create those wonderful fictional and imaginary worlds that give you so much fulfillment in several ways. I also think that the tools or mechanical aids that you use to implement different rule sets, they shouldn't limit you in how you play a role-playing game. If you are using miniatures and a grid, that doesn't mean that you are playing chess. If you want a situation where you're playing as a ninja or a monk, and that ninja and monk somersaults all over the place, they do backflips and front flips and cartwheels and all of that. Besides using the tumble rules, for example, when you move from a square to the other, you can imagine that the ninja or the monk is front flipping or cartwheeling into another square. Nothing is stopping you. I remember one of the role-playing games that I reviewed. It's a sort of anime RPG called Valor. I'm going to put the link in the description below. And I think it's in that video where one of my viewers asked me if he was able to play this really over-the-top cosmic level sort of situation where basically the characters are fighting in space, and when they, let's say that you punch your enemy and the force of the impact sends that enemy flying across several planets, like you can almost send the enemy all over to the other side of the universe. Even if you are using a grid, you can imagine it like that. Every square could be who knows how many light years of distance. So do not feel restrained by using grids or miniatures. They are just there to aid you in representing those situations. You can imagine anything that you like using grids or miniatures or whatever. Because when it comes to the theater of the mind, there is no problem in that case. But when you want those precise tactics to enhance the game aspect of tabletop role-playing games, those grids, those miniatures, those templates, anything that you use, it's just there to help you. You can imagine it however you like. And those are my general thoughts on rules when it comes to tabletop RPGs. If you have other thoughts about this subject, please let me know. I also want to thank Jefferson from the Solosfera channel. I hope I got the name correctly. Because he has been translating some of my videos to Portuguese, and he has been using some of his own ideas in those videos as well. If you do not know how to speak Portuguese, I recommend that you watch his channel with the subtitles and translation system here in YouTube activated. It does a fairly decent job. I do not know Portuguese, and I think I understood. I have been understanding the material of his videos. So thanks again, Jefferson, and to all of you that have been watching my videos, expect many things to come. I'm going to try to produce more and more videos covering different Free League RPGs, focusing at the moment on Symbaroum. I'm going to finish my Dark Lord RPG multi-part review, and I'm going to bring out that other splatterpunk type of RPG review that I was telling you. So once again, thank you, and thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending Drive-Thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.